The boom tube tore reality open above Times Square like a wound in God's flesh. Except there was no God here, only corporations wearing his face on billboards 50 feet high. Darkseid, Lord of Apokolips, stepped through the rift into a world that reeked of manufactured worship, his stone-gray form materializing amid screaming crowds and shattering glass. The dimensional breach had pulled him from the source wall's periphery during his eternal hunt for the anti-life equation, depositing him into a universe that tasted wrong, weak. The Omega effect pulsed behind his eyes as he surveyed this new reality, red energy crackling with barely contained annihilation. Below, a Vought international press conference dissolved into chaos. Homelander had been mid-sentence, something about protecting American families, when the sky split open. The blonde godchild in the cape froze, his smile flickering like a malfunctioning neon sign. Queen Maeve grabbed her sword. A train vibrated with chemical-enhanced speed that Darkseid recognized as laughably crude. The Deep backed away, his gills flaring uselessly. These were the champions of this world, these corporate mascots playing dress-up. Darkseid's voice rolled across the square like tectonic plates grinding. I am Darkseid, Lord of Apokolips. This world now kneels before its true master, or it burns. Homelander's laugh came too loud, too forced. The manchild floated upward, cape billowing in manufactured heroic glory, his media-trained smile stretched across his face. Well, well, another super-terrorist thinking he can. The Omega beam struck Homelander mid-sentence. Not to kill, Darkseid had use for specimens, but to teach. The red energy wrapped around the blue-clad hero, lifting him like a puppet on strings, then hurled him through 3 buildings. The trajectory was precise, calculated to demonstrate power while preserving the asset for study. The crowd's screams shifted from excitement to genuine terror, the kind Darkseid had heard across 1,000 conquered worlds. Homelander's down, someone shrieked. Holy shit, Homelander's down. Darkseid descended to the stage where Vought executives cowered behind overturned podiums. One man stood still, gray-haired African-American, wearing a suit worth more than most homes, his expression calculating rather than afraid. Stan Edgar, Vought's CEO, studied Darkseid with the cold assessment of someone who'd built empires on broken bodies and lies. Here was something familiar. Not power, but the recognition of power's utility. Gentlemen, Stan said to his security team without breaking eye contact with Darkseid, stand down, we're witnessing history. He stepped forward, hands visible, voice steady. I'm Stan Edgar, welcome to Earth. I believe we should talk about your arrival. Darkseid tilted his head, intrigued despite himself. This human understood something the others didn't. That resistance against Darkseid was futile, but negotiation might preserve something worth keeping. The Lord of Apokolips had conquered galaxies through both Omega beams and opportunity. You presume to negotiate with a god. I presume to recognize mutual benefit when I see it. Stan gestured at the chaos, at Homelander crawling from rubble half a mile away, blood on his golden hair. You're powerful, clearly more powerful than anything on this planet. But power without infrastructure is just destruction. Vought International controls superhuman development, media narratives, and government policy across 70 nations. You want this world? I can give it to you gift-wrapped, or you can burn it down and rule ashes. Before Darkseid could respond, Homelander rocketed back, his pretty boy face twisted into something feral. You motherfucker, I'm Homelander. I'm the greatest hero who ever. Darkseid caught him by the throat mid-flight, his stone grip stopping the hero's momentum absolutely. Homelander's eyes blazed red with heat vision that Darkseid felt as pleasant warmth against his face. The Lord of Apokolips studied this creature, enhanced human, pumped full of crude chemicals mimicking genetic superiority, his mind fractured by narcissism and media worship. A child given powers he couldn't comprehend, pretending to be godhood. You are nothing, Darkseid said, then activated the Omega effect again. This time the beams didn't strike, they invaded, red energy pouring into Homelander's eyes, showing him the truth, showing him Apokolips, the fire pits, the torture chambers. The billions of broken souls serving Darkseid not through compulsion but through the anti-life equation's whisper. that hope was illusion, freedom was pain, and submission was the only truth. Homelander saw what real tyranny looked like, what genuine worship meant, what actual gods could do. When Darkseid released him, Homelander fell to his knees, trembling. Something in his psyche had cracked. The man who'd lasered planes from the sky and smiled for cameras was having what Vought's PR team would later call a mental health episode. What Darkseid recognized as the first step toward breaking. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. 6 blocks away, in a shitty surveillance van filled with cigarette smoke and rage, Billy Butcher watched monitors showing Darkseid's arrival on every screen. Huey Campbell stood frozen beside him, mouth open. Mother's Milk gripped his gun despite knowing they all knew that bullets wouldn't matter. Frenchie whispered prayers in French he'd forgotten he knew. Kimiko's hands signed rapid confusion. "What the fuck is that?" Huey managed. Butcher's expression was unreadable behind his beard, but his voice carried something none of them had heard before, genuine fear mixed with darker satisfaction. "That, Huey, is what happens when the universe decides our cunts in capes aren't evil enough. That's an actual fucking monster, not Vought's knockoff action figures. We need to watch," Butcher interrupted, lighting a cigarette with hands that didn't shake only through supreme will. "Watch and learn, because whatever that thing is, it just bitch-slapped Homelander like a stepchild. Which means either we got a new worst-case scenario, or," he trailed off, mind working through possibilities that tasted like revenge and damnation. "Or what?" MM demanded. "Or the cunt of all cunts just met his daddy." On the screens, Darkseid was speaking with Stan Edgar, their conversation lost to distance, but their body language telling stories. A deal is being struck, an empire recognizing another empire. Then Darkseid raised one hand and the air behind him tore open again, not chaotically like his arrival, but controlled, deliberate. Through the boom tube came sounds that made hardened soldiers vomit, mechanized screaming. Wings like shredding metal, the growl of creatures bred for nothing but violence. Parademons poured through. Dozens, then hundreds, their bat-like wings spreading across Manhattan's sky like a plague of locusts designed by nightmares. They didn't attack immediately, they organized, forming ranks, responding to commands only Darkseid could give. A military force, an invasion force. And they landed around Vought Tower, claiming it like planting a flag on conquered territory. The Deep tried to run. A parademon caught him, dragged him back. A train's speed got him 3 blocks before Omega beams curved through buildings to wrap around his legs, pulling him back to kneel before Darkseid. Queen Maeve stood her ground, sword raised, and for that defiance, Darkseid granted her mercy. She would be useful later. But the message was clear to everyone watching. The 7 had fallen in under 10 minutes. Stan Edgar shook Darkseid's hand. The cameras caught it all. Within the hour, every news station globally would loop the footage. Homelander broken, parademons occupying Vought Tower, and Stan Edgar welcoming Earth's new overlord with a corporate smile. Social media exploded. Conspiracy theories, religious panic, government emergency broadcasts. But what terrified Butcher most was the YouTube comments already appearing, the Twitter threads going viral. Finally, a real hero. Homelander was always weak. We just couldn't see it. This Darkseid guy doesn't pretend. He's honest about power. Maybe we need someone strong to fix things. Humanity, faced with genuine tyranny, was already learning to worship it. Because that's what humanity did. It bent, it rationalized, it found reasons to serve rather than resist. Darkseid hadn't needed to conquer this world. He just needed to arrive. The machinery of submission was already built. Vought had spent decades constructing it. All Darkseid had to do was flip the switch from corporate fascism to cosmic fascism. "Bollocks," Butcher whispered, watching Darkseid's stone face fill the monitors. "We're fucked properly, completely fucked." Huey's voice was small. "What do we do?" Butcher crushed his cigarette, mind already working through scenarios where every choice led to damnation. "What we always do, lad. We find the cunt's weakness, we find his pressure points, and we make him bleed. He didn't mention that he had no idea if a god could bleed or what price they'd pay for trying. On the screens, Darkseid turned toward the surveillance camera as if he knew they were watching. His eyes blazed red, and for one eternal moment, Billy Butcher stared into the Omega effect and understood. This wasn't Homelander's sadistic narcissism or Stan Edgar's corporate sociopathy. This was something older, colder, and infinitely more certain of its righteousness. This was a god who'd watched universes burn and felt nothing but satisfaction at order achieved. The camera exploded. The van went dark except for emergency lighting, and somewhere in Vought Tower, Darkseid began building his empire on the bones of corporate heroism, his parademons dragging heroes and executives alike into processing centers where they'd learn what genuine worship meant. The boys sat in darkness, knowing the war hadn't ended. It had just escalated beyond anything their rage and Compound V could handle. They'd fought monsters pretending to be heroes. Now they'd face a hero who'd perfected being a monster. And Earth, tired of false gods, opened its arms to a real one. Vought Tower transformed within 48 hours. The corporate logo remained. Stan Edgar understood branding, but the interior became something else entirely. Parademons welded steel infrastructure that shouldn't exist on Earth, technology beyond human comprehension flowing through the building's bones like cancer metastasizing. The executive floors became fortress levels. The PR department became propaganda chambers. The Compound V laboratories became processing centers where Darkseid studied this universe's crude attempt at creating gods. Stan Edgar walked through corridors that now pulsed with red energy conduits, his $1,000 shoes clicking on floors stained with something that might have been blood or might have been the residue of dimensional rifting. He'd survived corporate wars, hostile takeovers, and superhero tantrums that left cities burning. This was just another negotiation, another pivot. The fact that his new business partner could disintegrate him with a glance was merely a variable to manage. He found Darkseid in what had been the genetics lab, studying vials of Compound V like a collector examining counterfeit art. The Lord of Apokolips turned, his stone face unreadable, holding humanity's greatest achievement between two fingers as if it might shatter from disappointment alone. "This is how you create gods," Darkseid's voice carried cosmic contempt. "Chemical injections that fracture DNA and produce unstable psychotics. You discovered the key to transcendence and used it to manufacture celebrity products." Stan's expression didn't flicker. "We used what we had to generate $17 billion in annual revenue and reshape global power structures. I'd call that effective resource management. You created children with weapons." Darkseid crushed the vial. Blue liquid dripped between his fingers, hissing where it touched his stone skin before evaporating. "I create soldiers, warriors bound by purpose, not narcissism. Your heroes are jokes, broken toys pretending at divinity because you gave them power without teaching them to kneel. They kneel to quarterly earnings and focus groups. It's effective enough." "Effective enough," Darkseid's laugh was tectonic. "Your strongest champion, this Homelander, has the emotional stability of a damaged infant. He lasers civilians when his ego bruises. He rapes and murders and smiles for cameras because your control is built on praise and threat, not genuine dominion. You've built a house of cards and called it an empire." Stan finally allowed himself a slight smile. "Which is why you're here. You offer stability, real control. The governments are already calling. They want to negotiate terms. They're terrified, which means they're cooperative. Give me 72 hours to position the narrative correctly, and I'll deliver you a planet that begs for your rule." "I don't need your timeline." Darkseid moved to the window, looking down at Manhattan, where parademons patrolled the streets and humans already walked with heads bowed. "I need your infrastructure, your media networks to spread truth, your laboratories to perfect your crude formulas, your heroes to serve as examples of what happens when mortals grasp at godhood without understanding its weight. The 7 are yours to reshape. Homelanders, recovering from your demonstration. Homelander is broken, useful. Darkseid turned back, his eyes glowing with Omega effect barely restrained. Take me to him. They found Homelander in what Vought called the reflection room, a padded cell they used when SUPs had psychotic breaks that required containment without PR scandals. He sat in the corner, still in his costume, cape wrapped around himself like a child's blanket. His eyes were distant, occasionally flickering red before dimming again. He rocked slightly, whispering to himself. "He's been like this since yesterday," Stan said quietly, his poker face finally showing cracks. "Our psychologists can't reach him. Whatever you showed him, I showed him the truth." Darkseid stepped into the cell, and Homelander's head snapped up like a dog recognizing its master. "I showed him Apokolips. The fire pits where billions serve me not through drugs or worship, but through understanding that resistance is the only real pain. I showed him what happens when a god stops pretending at humanity." Homelander's voice came out broken. "The screaming never stops there. The screaming never stops, and they're happy about it. They smile while they burn because you taught them that burning is love." "Yes," Darkseid knelt, bringing his stone face level with Homelander's pretty boy features now streaked with tears. "Because I understand what your corporate masters never could. Power without philosophy is just violence. You laser planes because you're angry. I reduce planets to ash because it serves order. You're a child with a flamethrower. I am fire itself given purpose. I'm the strongest. I'm Homelander. The Omega effect flashed. Not to hurt, but to connect. Red energy poured into Homelander again, but this time it didn't show him horror. It showed him structure, purpose. The anti-life equation's first whispers, that his pain came from pretending, from trying to be loved, from craving approval from creatures beneath him. That freedom from that need was achievable through submission to something greater than his fractured ego. "You are strong," Darkseid said, his voice almost gentle, almost paternal in the way nuclear radiation is warm. "But strength without direction is cancer. I offer you purpose, child. Serve me genuinely, not through drugs or contracts, and I will teach you what godhood actually means." Homelander's hand stopped shaking. Something in his eyes shifted, the manic desperation smoothing into something colder, more focused. He stood, and when he knelt before Darkseid, it wasn't the theatrical kneeling of Vought photo ops. It was a genuine supplication. "What would you have me do, Lord Darkseid?" Stan Edgar watched from the doorway, his corporate instincts screaming that he'd just witnessed something far more dangerous than Homelander's usual psychosis. This wasn't breaking, this was conversion. The difference between forcing someone to obey and making them want to serve. "Vought built you to be loved," Darkseid said, raising Homelander to his feet. "I will teach you to be feared, then respected, then necessary. Love is weakness, fear is honest, and necessity," he smiled, stone lips curving into something that had never known mercy, "necessity is eternal." 3 blocks away, the boys had relocated to a different surveillance setup. This one borrowed from the CIA through Huey's girlfriend Annie, formerly Starlight, currently AWOL from the Seven after refusing Darkseid's initial summons. Grace Mallory had provided equipment and personnel. And the government finally recognized that Vaught's corporate oversight had evolved into an existential threat. "He's converting them," MM said, watching thermal imaging of Vought Tower show movement patterns that looked increasingly military. "Not just controlling, he's making them believe." Butcher chain-smoked, his rage mixed with something that looked disturbingly like admiration. "Smart cunt. Homelander's a narcissist, breaks easily because his ego's got no foundation, but rebuild him with purpose instead of praise. That's more dangerous than the flying sociopath we had before." Huey studied footage of parademons organizing civilians into work details, not violently but efficiently, offering food and security to those who cooperated. People are lining up. Jesus Christ, they're volunteering to serve. Of course they are. Frenchie lit a cigarette from Butcher's. For years, Vought tells them superheroes are saviors. Now real savior arrives, one who doesn't pretend to care about their feelings, is honest about power. Humans worship strength, mon ami, always have. Kimiko signed rapidly and Frenchie translated. She says the paradum smell wrong, like meat but also like machines. She thinks Darkseid makes soldiers from people. He does. Annie's voice came from the doorway. She looked exhausted, her starlight costume replaced with civilian clothes, her identity as Huey's girlfriend now her only defining trait since abandoning heroism. I talked to Queen Maeve before the tower went dark. She said Darkseid took Ashley, some executives, and 3 C-list sups down to sub-level 9. Only Ashley came back up. She's different now. Efficient. Like someone replaced her anxiety with programming. Apokolips technology. Mallory entered behind Annie, the old CIA operative moving with military precision despite her age. We've been analyzing the energy signatures. Whatever Darkseid's building in that tower, it's not just headquarters, it's a processing facility. He's converting humans into something else. Into what? Huey's voice cracked. Into believers first, soldiers second. Mallory pulled up classified footage on the monitors, satellite imaging of Vought facilities worldwide, simultaneously receiving boom tube deliveries of Apokolips technology. He's not invading, he's upgrading. Vought's infrastructure in 70 nations is becoming his infrastructure. The processing centers aren't death camps, they're recruitment centers. People walk in scared, walk out cert. Butcher's jaw clenched. The anti-life equation. Everyone turned to him. He'd been researching, diving into every conspiracy forum and classified document Mallory could access, learning about this new god that made Homelander look like a schoolyard bully. The equation that eliminates free will does not do so through force, but through making freedom feel like a burden. It's not a weapon, Butcher continued, his voice tight. It's a proof. Mathematical proof that life is meaningless, hope is delusion, and obedience is the only logical response to existence. Darkseid's been searching for it across universes, but he doesn't need it complete, just fragments, just enough to make people question if fighting is worth the pain. Can it be stopped? Annie asked. Don't know, but I know someone who might. Butcher stood, grabbing his coat. We need to talk to the one soup who understands what actual principles look like, even if she is a self-righteous cunt. Queen Maeve, guessed. Maeve's compromised. She's still in the tower. Butcher's smile was razor-sharp. I'm talking about the bitch who punched Homelander and meant it. The one soup who might have backbone enough to stand against a god. Soldier Boy's still in cryo, Huey said. And he's not him, her. Butcher pulled up a file, Victoria Newman, Congresswoman, secret soup, and according to recent intelligence, possessing the ability to explode heads with a thought. She's ambitious, she's connected, and she's got actual power that doesn't require physical contact. If anyone's got a shot at getting close enough to Darkseid to matter, it's the head popper playing politician. She's also working with Vought, objected. Was working with Vought. Now Vought works with Darkseid, which means her power base just got kneecapped. Butcher's logic was ruthless. Enemy of my enemy and all that bollocks. We offer her a choice. Help us find Darkseid's weakness or watch her political career become target practice for Omega beams. Mallory considered it. It's insane. Everything's insane now. Butcher headed for the door. We're fighting a god with assault rifles and bad attitudes. Insane's the only play left. On the monitors behind them, Vought Tower's lights shifted patterns. No longer corporate white but Apokolips red, painting Manhattan in shades of fire and blood. And walking out onto the tower's balcony, visible to every camera in the city, Homelander stood beside Darkseid, his cape no longer billowing heroically but hanging with military precision. When Homelander spoke, his voice carried across the city through hijacked broadcast systems. People of Earth, I was wrong. I pretended to be your hero, your savior, your god, but I was a fraud, a corporate mascot playing dress-up. Lord Darkseid has shown me the truth, real strength, real purpose. He offers us what Vought never could, honest rule by genuine power. No more lies, no more pretending, just order, security, and the peace that comes from knowing your place. The cameras caught people in the street stopping, listening. Some ran, but too many far too many slowly nodded. And Darkseid smiled, knowing that Earth's conquest wouldn't require fire. Just the truth about what humans really wanted. someone to tell them that submission was easier than freedom, and that they'd been searching for a master all along. Within 2 weeks, Darkseid's empire metastasized across the globe like cancer wearing a corporate logo. Vought's international infrastructure became processing centers where humans entered confused and emerged converted, not mindless but convinced. The anti-life equation's fragments whispered through every facility. Hope breeds disappointment, freedom breeds chaos, submission breeds peace. It wasn't brainwashing. It was philosophy delivered with mathematical certainty, and humanity's exhausted masses embraced it like drowning men grabbing anchors. The governments fell in line with embarrassing speed. The UN held emergency sessions where diplomats who'd spent careers condemning authoritarianism suddenly found reasons why Darkseid's transitional leadership served global stability. Russia welcomed Apokolips technology. China integrated parademons into its military structure. The United States, God bless America, signed treaties positioning Darkseid as international peacekeeping coordinator, while Vought's stock hit record highs. Only pockets of resistance remained, scattered and desperate, led by the kind of people stupid or brave enough to fight gods with improvised weapons and fuck all for hope. Billy Butcher stood in an abandoned meatpacking plant in New Jersey, surrounded by the largest gathering of anti-Darkseid forces Earth could muster, 37 people. The boys. Grace Mallory's remaining CIA operatives. Annie January, powerless after Vought remotely deactivated her light manipulation abilities through tech Darkseid had upgraded. A handful of B-list sups who'd refused the call to kneel. And Victoria Newman, the head-popping congresswoman whose political ambitions had collided with cosmic tyranny. This is it. Victoria surveyed the room with barely concealed contempt, her tailored suit and perfect hair contrasting sharply with the Resistance's blood and desperation. This is what's supposed to stop a god, a British psychopath, some traumatized vigilantes, and sups whose greatest accomplishments include what? Clogging toilets with supershits. Careful, love, Butcher's voice carried a warning wrapped in politeness. We're the cunts with the plan. You're just the cunt with the head-popping parlor trick we're graciously letting play. My parlor trick has eliminated senators and judges. What's your plan accomplished besides getting people killed? Kept us breathing when smarter people bent knee. Butcher lit a cigarette, smoke curling between them. But you're right about one thing, we need more than attitude and anger. We need intelligence on what Darkseid's actually building in those processing centers. Which is where you come in, Congresswoman. Victoria's eyes narrowed. I'm not walking into Vought Tower to get converted or killed. You won't have to. Mallory stepped forward, spreading satellite imagery across a makeshift table. Darkseid's expanding operations. New processing center opening in Baltimore, smaller scale, still ramping up security. You've got political clearance and existing Vought connections. You tour the facility, express support for integration initiatives, and plant these. She dropped a container of microsurveillance devices that looked like protein pills. You want me to bug an alien god's facility. We want you to be a politician, said quietly. Do what you do best, smile, lie, and gather power. Just this time, share what you learn. Victoria studied the devices, her expression calculating. Politics had trained her to assess cost-benefit in microseconds. Opposing Darkseid openly meant death, but infiltrating his operation, becoming useful while feeding intelligence to the Resistance, that was leverage, insurance. And if Darkseid eventually fell, she'd be positioned as the hero who enabled his defeat. 20%, she said finally. Butcher blinked. 20% of what? Of whatever comes after. When Darkseid's gone, someone has to rebuild. I want a guaranteed position in the power structure, presidential cabinet minimum, ideally VP. You're negotiating a promotion for fighting fascism. I'm negotiating survival and opportunity. You need me more than I need you. There are a dozen ways I could walk out of here and make deals with Darkseid instead. I'm choosing resistance because I'm betting he's vulnerable. But I don't bet for free. Butcher wanted to put a bullet in her calculating face, but he'd spent years learning that righteousness didn't win wars, pragmatism and brutal choices did. 10%. And you deliver actionable intelligence, not political horseshit. 15. And I get immunity for anything I've done or will do in service of the resistance. Deal. They shook hands with the warmth of snakes recognizing each other's venom. Now get inside that facility and find us something we can use to kill a god. Victoria left in a Mercedes with government plates, already rehearsing her lines about supporting integration for national security. The resistance watched her go with the awareness that they just allied with a monster to fight a bigger monster, and that moral compromises in war were just called Tuesday. Think she'll betray us? Huey asked quietly. Absolutely, Butcher said. The question is whether she does it before or after we get what we need. I'm betting on after. And if you're wrong, then I'll pop her head myself before she finishes the sentence. Butcher turned to the assembled resistance, broken heroes and traumatized civilians who'd somehow found courage when gods demanded submission. Right. We've got 3 objectives while the Congresswoman plays spy. First, locate anyone who's escaped processing and debrief them. We need to understand what Darkseid's actually doing to people. Second, find out where Homelander is and what he's doing now that he's Darkseid's pet psychopath. Third, figure out if there's anyone on this planet strong enough to actually hurt Darkseid, because right now we're bringing knives to a nuclear holocaust. What about Soldier Boy? Someone asked. He almost killed Homelander before. If we unfreeze him, Soldier Boy's a racist cunt who'd probably shake Darkseid's hand and ask to join up, Butcher cut in. Plus, he's frozen in a CIA black site that's now under Darkseid's control. Next suggestion. Annie spoke up, her voice carrying weight despite losing her powers. What about international heroes? The UK has subs, Russia, China, are they resisting? China's integrated completely, Mallory answered. Their subs were state-controlled already, so transitioning to Darkseid was seamless. Russia's oligarchs cut deals trading oil for Apokolips tech. The UK, she paused. MI6 reports that London's facility is running 24/7 conversions. Europe's falling like dominoes. So we're alone. We were always alone. Frenchie lit another cigarette from his last one. Vought had the world by the balls for decades, this is just a more honest version. Instead of corporate masters pretending to care, we have an alien god who admits he doesn't, is actually refreshing in a terrible way. Nothing refreshing about fascism, snapped. No, but is something almost admirable about honesty. Frenchie's smile was bitter. For years, we have fought Vaught's lies. Now we fight truth that power doesn't need permission, that order beats freedom when people are tired enough, that maybe humans don't want to be saved. This is a harder fight because the enemy isn't lying. The room fell silent with the weight of that recognition. Vought had been beatable because its heroism was corporate theater, but Darkseid offered something seductive, genuine security through genuine submission, no false promises, just the comfort of certainty and someone else making decisions. Kimiko signed frantically and Frenchie translated. She says there's one person who might be strong enough, someone who already rejected Vaught's control and survived. Who? Ryan, Annie's voice went quiet. Homelander's son, the only natural-born supe, if his powers are anything like his father's but without the psychological damage. Ryan's a child, Huey objected. We can't. Ryan's 8 years old and can throw trucks, Butcher interrupted, his expression unreadable. And Homelander's obsessed with him. Used to be anyway before Darkseid scrambled his brains. If we grab Ryan, we might get leverage, or a weapon, or at minimum, we keep him out of Darkseid's hands. You want to kidnap a kid to use against his father. I want to prevent Darkseid from creating another converted superhuman who doesn't know any reality except Apokolips philosophy. Butcher's voice hardened. Ryan's the only supe on Earth born instead of made, which means he's the only one whose powers might actually threaten something cosmic. We get him first, or Darkseid turns him into Homelander 2 with better programming. The moral calculus was sickening. Weaponize a child or let him become a weapon for tyranny. There were no good choices anymore, just degrees of damnation. I'll do it, said finally. I'll extract Ryan, but we don't tell him what he is until he's old enough to choose. We give him something Homelander never had, a childhood that isn't training for godhood." Butcher nodded. "Frenchie, Kimiko, you're with MM. Annie, coordinate with Mallory's people on safe houses. Huey." "I'm going to Baltimore," Huey said, surprising everyone, including himself. "Victoria needs backup. Someone who can get video evidence if she can't plant the bugs. Someone expendable." "You're not expendable." Annie grabbed his arm. "I'm a normal human with no powers in a universe that just got invaded by a god. I'm the definition of expendable." Huey's voice cracked, but he held firm. "But maybe that's useful. Darkseid's looking for threats. He won't see me coming because there's nothing to see." Butcher studied the kid who'd started this journey crying over his girlfriend's remains and had somehow found steel beneath the trauma. "Right. Don't get converted. Don't get killed. Get evidence and get out." Heroism's for cunts with death wishes. They dispersed into missions with the awareness that most of them wouldn't survive whatever came next. Resistance against Vought had been dangerous. Resistance against Darkseid was suicide with extra steps. But humanity had always been best at choosing beautiful suicide over comfortable surrender. That night, Victoria Newman toured the Baltimore Processing Center with manufactured enthusiasm, shaking hands with Apokolips-modified staff, while Huey filmed from a janitor's closet with equipment that would have been impossible to smuggle past Vought's old security. But Darkseid's forces weren't looking for cameras. They were certain no evidence could change minds already convinced. The footage Huey captured would haunt Resistance nightmares for months. Humans walking into clean, clinical rooms and emerging hours later with something fundamental changed. Not mindless, worse than mindless. Purposeful. Efficient. Stripped of doubt and ambition and the messy chaos that made humanity human. They spoke of freedom as childish fantasy, hope as mathematical impossibility, and Darkseid's rule as the only logical response to existence's cruelty. The anti-life equation didn't need to be complete. Fragments were enough to make me feel like enlightenment. Victoria planted the surveillance devices while touring the neurological modification wing, her political smile never faltering even as she watched techs use mother box technology to rewrite human psychology. She asked intelligent questions about integration metrics and conversion efficiency, while internally calculating how many deaths she'd be complicit in and whether the power she'd gain was worth it. She decided it was. She always did. Huey watched from shadows, his camera recording everything, his hands shaking but steady enough. He'd seen Vought's corporate evil for years, the murders covered up, the abuses ignored, the monstrous heroism packaged for profit. But this was different. This wasn't evil pretending to be good. This was evil admitting itself and being welcomed. As he watched humans volunteer for processing, watched them emerge grateful for their conversion, watched them thank Darkseid for eliminating the burden of choice, Huey understood something that broke him and reformed him simultaneously. Some people wanted this. Not everyone, but enough. Enough people were tired of freedom's weight, democracy's chaos, and hope's disappointment that genuine tyranny felt like relief. And that realization was more terrifying than any superhuman violence, because you couldn't fight people choosing their chains. In Vought Tower, Darkseid watched surveillance feeds from every processing center worldwide, his stone face emotionless as millions walked willingly into his embrace. Homelander stood beside him, no longer the manic child god but something colder and more focused, a weapon reforged with purpose instead of praise. "The Resistance will try something," Homelander said, his voice lacking its usual desperate need for approval. "They always do. Should I eliminate them?" "No," Darkseid's smile was tectonic. "Let them struggle, let them film our facilities and spread their evidence. Let them convince themselves that showing the truth will change minds. It won't. Humans don't reject tyranny because they're shown it. They reject tyranny only when it feels worse than freedom, and I am making tyranny comfortable." "What about the boy, Ryan?" Darkseid turned, his eyes glowing red with something that might have been curiosity. "Your son, The only natural-born superhuman. You want him. Homelander hesitated, old programming warring with new purpose. I want him to understand what you've taught me. That power without submission to something greater is just a tantrum. That godhood isn't about being loved, it's about being necessary. Then you will retrieve him. Show me that your conversion is complete by converting your son. Darkseid placed one stone hand on Homelander's shoulder, the gesture paternal in the way avalanches are natural. Bring Ryan to Apokolips philosophy. Raise him as I have raised you, not as a wounded child playing God, but as a weapon knowing its purpose. Homelander's smile, when it came, held none of his old madness, just cold certainty. Yes, Lord Darkseid. And across the world, resistance cells recorded evidence that would convince no one, planned operations that would fail against cosmic power, and held onto hope that had already been mathematically disproven by the anti-life equation's whisper. Freedom is pain. Submission is peace. Darkseid is inevitable. But they fought anyway because humanity had always been best at impossible wars against certain odds, and because sometimes choosing beautiful failure was the only freedom left. The safe house in rural Pennsylvania burned before Frenchie, and Kimiko got within 2 miles. They watched from the tree line as parademons circled the flames like vultures, their mechanized shrieks carrying across farmland that had grown corn for 3 generations before becoming tactical collateral. Ryan had been hidden there, 8 years old, most powerful being on Earth, protected by retired CIA operatives who'd promised Mallory they could keep one kid safe. Promises meant fuck all against gods. Merde, Frenchie whispered, his usual dark humor absent. Through binoculars they could see bodies, not many, not enough, which meant some had been taken alive for processing, questioning, or whatever Apokolips called torture. Mm's jaw clenched so hard that Frenchie heard teeth grinding. Ryan, no small body, no child. Kimiko signed rapidly, her enhanced vision scanning the wreckage. But Homelander was here, his laser signature on the walls, precision cuts, not rage. He came for his son. Then we're too late. Lowered his binoculars, the weight of failure crushing him. They'd moved too slowly, been too careful, and now Darkseid had Earth's only natural-born superhuman. We need to tell Butcher. The phone call lasted 30 seconds, just long enough for Butcher to receive the news, process it, and respond with creative profanity that questioned the sexual habits of every divine being across multiple pantheons. Then silence. Then, get back to base. We're accelerating the timeline. What timeline? Demanded. We don't have a plan. We don't have weapons that can hurt Darkseid. We don't even have confirmed intelligence from Victoria yet. Then we make do with what we've got. Spite and increasingly poor decisions. Butcher's voice carried the edge of a man who'd already accepted damnation and was now shopping for the best location in hell. Just get back. Things are about to get properly fucked. They drove back through an America that looked simultaneously normal and occupied. Darkseid hadn't needed tanks in the streets, just the promise of order and the threat of Omega beams for those who refused. Most cities function normally, their citizens going to work and school and shopping, the only difference being parademon patrols and processing centers that neighbors entered voluntarily. The propaganda was everywhere. Billboards that used to advertise Vought heroes now showed Darkseid with slogans like "Certainty over chaos" and "True strength serves." Social media had become conversion testimony, millions posting about finding purpose through submission, describing the relief of abandoning hope's burden, thanking Darkseid for eliminating the exhausting pretense of freedom. People actually believe this shit, said, watching a TikTok video where a soccer mom described processing as finally understanding that happiness was never the goal, peace is. They always believed it, Frenchie said quietly. Vought taught them to worship superheroes, to want saviors instead of equality. Darkseid just removed the middleman. Instead of pretend gods who sell sneakers, they get a real god who's honest about dominion. For many is an upgrade. Kimiko signed something sharp and Frenchie translated. She says we're the crazy ones for thinking freedom is worth this much pain. Maybe we are. Gripped the steering wheel harder. But crazy's all we got left. They reached the meatpacking plant to find chaos. Butcher was on 3 phones simultaneously, coordinating with resistance cells while Mallory worked tactical displays showing Vought facilities worldwide. Huey sat in the corner with Annie, both watching his Baltimore footage on loop, the clinical efficiency of human conversion, the grateful testimonies of the processed, the comfortable horror of tyranny that felt like therapy. "You're back. Good." Butcher hung up on whoever had been mid-sentence. Victoria came through, planted the surveillance and got architectural plans for the Baltimore facility before they made her. Made her? MM's stomach dropped. Relax, she talked her way out. Convinced them she was touring to write policy recommendations for federal integration. But we've got 48 hours, maybe less, before Darkseid's people analyze her movements and realize she bugged the place. Butcher pulled up blueprints on the display. Which means we've got one shot at hitting this facility, grabbing whatever research they're doing on the anti-life equation, and hopefully finding something we can weaponize before the entire operation becomes moot. "That's suicide," Huey said flatly. "Even if we get inside, even if we steal the research, Darkseid will hunt us down. We can't fight him." "No, we can't, but we can fight his infrastructure, make him bleed resources, force him to react, create enough chaos that maybe, someone with actual power notices and gives a shit." Butcher's plan was desperation, wearing tactical gear. "We hit Baltimore tonight. Small team, me, Frenchie, Kimiko. The rest of you provide overwatch and extraction." "I'm coming." Annie stood, her powerless state somehow making her more dangerous rather than less. "I know Vaught's security protocols. Even modified, they'll follow patterns. You've got no powers, love. You'll be a liability. I've got training and I've got rage. That's more useful than half these people." She gestured at the resistance members cleaning weapons with the dedication of soldiers who knew they were already dead. "Plus, you need someone who's been inside these facilities. Someone who knows how heroes think when they've been converted." Butcher studied her, the fallen starlight who'd chosen principle over power and lost everything. "Right, you're in. Anyone else feeling suicidal tonight?" Victoria Newman walked through the door, her political armor replaced with tactical gear that looked expensive and somehow still professional. "I am, but I expect hazard pay. Thought you were burned." "I am, which means I'm dead if I don't deliver something that makes me valuable to whichever side wins." She dropped a hard drive on the table. "That's everything I memorized from their computer systems, facility layouts, processing schedules, staff rotations, and most importantly, the location of what they're calling the equation fragment vault." Butcher grabbed the drive like it was the Holy Grail. "What's in the vault?" "No idea, but it's guarded by 3 parademons, biometric locks, and Homelander personally reviewed its security. Whatever it is, Darkseid wants it protected." Victoria's smile was predatory. "Which means it's valuable, which means we steal it." "Why help us?" demanded. "You could have taken this to Darkseid, proven your loyalty." "Because Darkseid doesn't need me. He's got millions volunteering for conversion. But you need me, which means I have leverage. And when this is over, whether you win or Darkseid does, I'll be positioned as either the hero who enabled resistance or the pragmatic politician who tried infiltration first." Victoria's honesty was more disturbing than lies. "I'm hedging bets. Don't pretend you wouldn't do the same." Butcher laughed, dark and sharp. "I like you, Congresswoman. You're a sociopath, but at least you're competent about it. Welcome to the team. Try not to betray us until after the mission. No promises." They spent 6 hours planning the impossible. The Baltimore facility was smaller than Vought Tower but more secure. Darkseid had learned from decades of Vaught's complacency. Parademon patrols rotated every 20 minutes. Biometric scanners required registered handprints. Thermal imaging covered every corridor. And somewhere inside, Homelander prowled with new purpose, no longer the manic child god but Darkseid's perfected weapon. "We'll need a distraction," Mallory said, studying the blueprints. something big enough to pull security from the vault level. "I can detonate the processing wing," Frenchie offered. "Create an explosion that looks like equipment failure. Panic without obvious sabotage." "That wing's full of people being converted," Annie objected. "That wing's full of people choosing conversion," Frenchie corrected coldly. "We cannot save those who want chains. We can only steal what might free those who don't." The moral calculus was sickening. Condemn volunteers to save hypothetical future victims. But war against gods didn't allow clean hands, just degrees of blood and whose you were willing to spill. "Do it," Butcher decided. "We go in at 2 a.m. Frenchie rigs the explosion for 2:15. That gives us 15 minutes to reach the vault, crack it, and extract before every parademan in Maryland comes down on our heads." Questions? "Yeah," Huey said quietly. "What if the vault contains something worse than what we're fighting? What if Darkseid locked it away for a reason? Then we improvise, same as always." Butcher checked his weapons. Assault rifles that wouldn't scratch Darkseid, explosives that might annoy parademons, and spite sufficient to power a small nation. "We're already fucked. Might as well be fucked while accomplishing something." They moved out at midnight. 6 people in a stolen van heading toward Baltimore with the awareness that most of them wouldn't see dawn. The city looked peaceful under parademan patrols, the peace of submission, the quiet of broken will. Billboards showed Darkseid's stone face with messages about serving greatness. Social media feeds on loops showed conversion testimonials. The radio played pop songs interrupted by public service announcements encouraging voluntary processing. America had fallen without a shot being fired, conquered by offering exhausted masses what they'd always wanted, someone else to make the hard choices. The facility loomed ahead, converted vault building now pulsing with red Apokolips energy. They parked 3 blocks away, moving through shadows that seemed darker now that gods walked the earth. Frenchie split off first, heading toward the processing wing with enough C4 to level a city block. The rest approached from the maintenance entrance, where Victoria's stolen credentials got them past the first checkpoint. Inside, the facility hummed with efficiency that made Vaught's corporate bureaucracy look chaotic. Humans and parademons worked side by side, their movements synchronized like hive insects. No one questioned their presence. Victoria's congressional credentials and MMs forged Vought executive ID created cognitive dissonance that security resolved by assuming authorization. They reached sublevel 3 before the pattern broke. A door opened and Homelander stepped out, his cape hanging with military precision, his eyes scanning them with recognition that held no rage, just cold assessment. "Well," he said, his voice lacking its usual performative emotion, "the Resistance sends its best. I'm almost flattered." Butcher raised his rifle despite knowing it was a theater. "Come to convert us, you cunt." "No, you'll resist conversion. Your rage is too fundamental to your identity. Lord Darkseid taught me to recognize efficient targets versus waste of resources." Homelander tilted his head, studying them like specimens. "But I can't let you reach the vault. Not because you'd succeed, you won't, but because failure needs to be public, recorded, distributed. Humanity needs to see resistance ending in fire." His eyes began to glow red, and Butcher knew they had seconds before those lasers carved them into pieces. But before Homelander could strike, the building shook. Frenchie's explosion, early, too early, which meant something had gone wrong or he'd improvised or both. The blast threw everyone to the ground. Alarms shrieked. Sprinklers activated. And in the chaos, Kimiko moved with inhuman speed, tackling Homelander through a wall before his lasers could fire. They crashed into an adjacent room, her feral snarls mixing with his surprised grunt. "G.O.," MM shouted, hauling Butcher up. They ran while Homelander and Kimiko's fight shook the building, her regeneration against his invulnerability, both knowing she couldn't win but buying seconds with her body. They reached the vault as parademons swarmed from above. Victoria's biometric hack worked, her stolen handprints opening locks that should have required Darkseid himself. The vault door swung open to reveal not weapons or research but something far worse. A mother box. Not the small portable kind Cyborg wore, but massive, 6 feet tall, pulsing with red energy, covered in glyphs that hurt to look at directly. And flowing across its surface in mathematical precision, fragments of the anti-life equation, not complete but enough. Enough to break minds, enough to eliminate hope, enough to prove that existence was suffering and submission was the only rational response. "Fuck me," Butcher whispered, staring at humanity's damnation rendered in alien mathematics. "We can't carry it," said. "We can't even touch it. Look at the energy field." "Then we destroy it." Annie grabbed the explosives from MM's pack. "Blow it up before Darkseid completes the equation." "Or," Victoria said quietly, her eyes locked on the mother box with hungry understanding, "we take a fragment, just enough to understand how it works, maybe enough to develop a counter, or enough to convert ourselves," snapped. "Risk worth taking." Victoria reached for the mother box. Omega beams struck from behind, wrapping around her arm before she could touch the device. They looked up to see Darkseid standing in the vault entrance, his stone face emotionless, his presence filling the room like gravity incarnate. "Bold," he said, his voice tectonic. "Foolish, but bold. You understood enough to seek the equation's fragments. Impressive for insects." He stepped forward and reality seemed to compress around him. "But you fundamentally misunderstand what you're fighting. The anti-life equation is not a weapon. It is mathematics, proof. You cannot destroy proof of suffering's inevitability any more than you can destroy gravity." Butcher raised his rifle, useless, but fuck it, dying on your feet beat kneeling. "You're wrong, you stone-faced cunt. Humanity's survived worse than you." "No," Darkseid said gently, almost kindly. "You haven't. You've survived pretenders, Vaught's corporate fascism, nuclear weapons, climate catastrophes. But you've never faced genuine inevitability. I am not a disaster. I am order. And order always conquers chaos given time." His Omega beams flashed. The world became red energy and pain, and the certainty that they'd failed, that resistance was delusion, that submission was. The vault exploded. Not from Annie's explosives, but from above, a figure crashing through reinforced concrete with force that sent Darkseid stumbling. Small, young eyes glowing with red heat that matched his father's but burned brighter with something that looked like rage or confusion or both. Ryan, Homelander's son. The boy they'd tried to rescue was now hovering in the wreckage, his child's face streaked with tears, his power fully manifested and clearly unstable. "I don't want this," Ryan screamed, his voice cracking puberty high. "I don't want to serve him. I don't want to be like Dad. I just want." His heat vision fired wild, carving through walls and parademons and the mother box itself. The equation fragment device shattered, and the resulting energy release was mathematical screaming, reality itself rejecting the proof of hopelessness being destroyed. Darkseid roared, the first genuine emotion they'd heard from him, as fragments of the anti-life equation scattered into energy and ash. Years of research, the key to effortless conquest, obliterated by a child's tantrum. "Retreat," Mallory's voice crackled through their earpieces. "Buildings coming down, get out now." They ran through collapsing corridors while Darkseid hunted Ryan with Omega beams that the boy barely dodged. Homelander appeared, reaching for his son, but Ryan's heat vision drove him back. Kimiko grabbed Butcher, half carrying him through the chaos. Pulled Annie from under fallen debris. Victoria ran ahead, already calculating how to spin this disaster into political capital. They made it outside as the facility collapsed, taking Darkseid's primary equation research with it. The mother box fragment was destroyed. Ryan hovered above the wreckage, crying and powerful and completely uncontrolled, the only being on Earth whose accidental rage had actually hurt Darkseid's plans. "Get the boy," Butcher commanded, but parademons swarmed from every direction. They retreated to the van while Ryan flew away into the night, a child god rejecting both his father's new purpose and his enemy's desperate cause. As they drove away from Baltimore burning, Butcher allowed himself a smile that tasted like blood and ashes. They hadn't won, but they'd proved something important. Darkseid could be disrupted, his plans could fail, and humanity's chaos, especially the chaos of a traumatized 8-year-old with godlike powers, was a weapon no equation could predict. The war wasn't over, but for the first time since Darkseid's arrival, resistance had drawn blood. And somewhere in the ruins, Darkseid stood over the scattered fragments of his research, his stone face cracking with something that might have been fury or respect or both. "Impressive," he said to the ashes. "You've earned a slower death." 3 weeks after Baltimore, Earth existed in a state of escalating tension that felt like holding breath before drowning. Darkseid's response to the destroyed equation research wasn't the immediate annihilation everyone expected. It was methodical expansion. Processing centers doubled. Paradum patrols tripled. Voluntary conversions accelerated as Darkseid's media apparatus framed the facility destruction as a terrorist attack against humanity's peaceful integration. Public opinion, already leaning toward submission, hardened into genuine support. The resistance had struck a blow and somehow made their enemy stronger. Billy Butcher stood on the roof of their latest safe house, a condemned hospital in Detroit where even parademons didn't bother patrolling, watching the city lights below. Half were normal street lamps, the other half pulsed with Apokolips red, marking converted buildings where Darkseid's infrastructure grew like cancer. He'd spent 30 years fighting Vought's corporate evil, learning to hate with professional precision. But this was hatred meeting futility, and futility was winning. "We're losing," Huey said from behind him, his voice carrying exhausted certainty rather than fear. The kid had changed. Baltimore had burned away the last of his optimism, leaving something harder underneath. "Every metric says we're losing. More processing centers, more conversions, more people are choosing Darkseid." "Yeah." Butcher lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his bearded face. "We are. So what do we do?" "What we always do. Keep fighting until we can't, then fight some more out of spite." Butcher exhaled smoke toward the red-lit cityscape. "Darkseid thinks he's inevitable, thinks his anti-life equation proves submission is rational and resistance is delusion. But here's the thing about inevitability. Sometimes you fight it anyway, not because you'll win, but because fuck inevitability. That's not a plan, that's just stubborn suicide. Welcome to resistance, mate, should have read the brochure." Below, the hospital's main floor hosted what remained of organized opposition to Darkseid's rule. Mallory coordinated with international cells, pitifully small groups in Europe, Asia, South America, all reporting the same pattern: governments integrating, populations volunteering, resistance shrinking. Maintained weapons that couldn't kill gods but might annoy parademons. Frenchie manufactured explosives with the dedication of someone who'd accepted damnation and decided to make it artistic. Kimiko sharpened knives that would break against Darkseid's stone skin, but might hurt his converted humans. Annie sat in the corner with Victoria, the former hero and the ambitious politician, forming an unlikely alliance based on mutual pragmatism and shared recognition that principles were luxuries in wars against gods. They were planning something. Butcher could see it in their whispered conversations and the way they studied files on Homelander's movements. "We've located Ryan," Mallory announced, pulling up satellite imagery. The boy had been hiding in rural Montana, his powers keeping him off Darkseid's radar but also isolated from help or guidance. "He's alone, scared, and according to thermal imaging his power output is increasing, stress or puberty or both. He's a nuclear weapon without safety protocols." "Can we reach him?" asked. "Maybe, but so can Homelander. Intel suggests Darkseid ordered him to retrieve his son not for conversion but for elimination. Ryan's too unstable, too unpredictable. He destroyed the equation research, which makes him a liability rather than an asset." Butcher processed that, his tactical mind already working through implications. "Darkseid's cutting losses. Ryan can't be controlled, so he's removing the variable." "Which gives us an opportunity," Victoria said, stepping forward with Annie beside her. We get to Ryan first. We offer him something Darkseid can't, a choice. Not conversion or death, but actual goddamn choice. The kid's 8 years old with his father's powers and none of his training, objected. He's dangerous, to us, to himself, to everyone. Exactly. Annie's voice carried steel that losing her powers had somehow strengthened. He's dangerous to everyone, including Darkseid. That makes him our best weapon, not because we can control him, but because nobody can. Chaos is the only thing Darkseid's certainty can't predict. You want to weaponize a traumatized child, Huey said slowly, his moral compass spinning between revulsion and desperate pragmatism. I want to give a traumatized child the one thing Vought and Darkseid never offered: agency. Let him choose who he becomes. Annie met Butcher's eyes. We can't beat Darkseid with force. We've proven that. But we can introduce variables that his equations can't solve. Ryan is chaos incarnate. We point him at Darkseid's certainty and see what breaks. Butcher studied her, the fallen hero who'd learned that good intentions didn't win wars, that sometimes you fought monsters by becoming monstrous, that the gap between heroism and terrorism was just marketing. You've got a plan. We get Ryan before Homelander does. We show him the truth about what his father became under Darkseid's influence. We offer him training, support, and the choice to either hide or fight. If he chooses to fight, Annie's smile was razor sharp. We've got the only being on Earth whose power might actually threaten Darkseid. If he chooses to hide, we've still denied Darkseid an asset and prevented another conversion. And if Homelander gets to him first, then Darkseid eliminates the one wild card we had, and we're back where we started, fucked, but no more fucked than before. The logic was brutal and beautiful. Butcher approved. Right, Annie, Victoria, you two extract Ryan. Frenchie, Kimiko, prepare for retaliation when Darkseid realizes we've grabbed his target. Huey, I know, overwatch and documentation. Huey had learned his role, the normal human who recorded heroism and horror so that future generations might understand what resistance cost. Actually, Mallory interrupted, pulling up new intelligence that made everyone's blood freeze. We've got a bigger problem. According to CIA satellites, Darkseid is building something in Vought Tower. Massive construction, pulling resources from every facility worldwide. Whatever it is, it's big enough to be seen from orbit and growing faster than should be possible. The imagery showed Vought Tower transformed, the building now towering twice its original height, surrounded by structures that looked simultaneously technological and occult. Energy signatures pulsed with Apokolips red, and at the structure's center, something that looked like a portal or gateway or wound in reality itself. Boom tube, Butcher said quietly, recognizing the dimensional technology from their research. He's building a permanent boom tube. But to where? Apokolips. Victoria's voice carried horrified certainty. He's not just conquering Earth, he's connecting it to his home dimension. Once that gateway is complete, he can bring his full forces through. Millions of parademons, his elite. His entire empire. Earth won't be occupied territory, it'll be Apokolips's newest district. The implications crushed them with existential weight. Everything they'd fought for, every small victory, every desperate resistance, all of it would be erased when Darkseid merged Earth with his empire of eternal tyranny. The processing centers were just preparation, converting enough humans to maintain order while his real forces arrived. How long? Demanded. 72 hours, maybe less. The construction's accelerating. Mallory's tactical expertise warred with despair. We can't stop it. We don't have weapons, manpower, or power sufficient to assault Vought Tower and destroy that gateway before completion. Then we don't stop it, Annie said, her voice cutting through the despair. We disrupt it, sabotage it, turn Darkseid's certainty into catastrophic failure. With what? Huey asked. We tried attacking his facility and barely escaped. Vought Tower is his fortress. It's guarded by Homelander, parademons, and probably Darkseid himself. We attack with the one thing he can't predict, Ryan. Annie turned to Butcher. We grab the kid, we train him for 72 hours, and we point his uncontrolled power at that gateway. Either he destroys it, or his chaos disrupts it enough that the boom tube tears wrong, sends Darkseid's forces somewhere other than Earth. You're betting humanity's survival on an 8-year-old's tantrum, said flatly. I'm betting humanity's survival on the one power on Earth that's proven it can damage Darkseid's plans, Annie corrected. Ryan destroyed the equation research accidentally. Imagine what he could do deliberately, with even minimal guidance. Butcher weighed the plan against the abyss of alternatives. It was insane, reckless, built on hope despite the anti-life equation proving hope was a mathematical impossibility. But insanity was their brand, and recklessness had gotten them this far. Fuck it, we're already dead, might as well die accomplishing something. He started barking orders. Annie, Victoria, Montana extraction, 6-hour window. Frenchie, rig every explosive we've got for the tower assault. Coordinate with what's left of international resistance. See if anyone's got heavy weapons or suicide bombers who want martyrdom with purpose. Kimiko. He looked at the silent woman who'd survived horrors and chose to inflict them on monsters. You're with me. We're going to Vought Tower to scout the gateway while everyone else handles Ryan. That's suicide, Huey objected. Everything's suicide now, lad. The question is whether we die whimpering or screaming. Butcher checked his weapons, knowing they were theater but needing the ritual. We've got 72 hours to teach a kid to use his god powers, infiltrate a fortress run by an actual god, and sabotage dimensional technology we don't understand. Standard Tuesday. They moved with the efficiency of soldiers who'd accepted death and found freedom in certainty. Annie and Victoria headed for Montana in a stolen military helicopter, their unlikely partnership based on shared recognition that saving Ryan meant maybe, just maybe, saving humanity's last chance. Coordinated with resistance cells worldwide, compiling their final assets, 40 pounds of military-grade explosives, 3 RPGs, a nerve gas canister from Russian contacts, and 200 fighters willing to die attacking parademons if it bought seconds for the real assault. Butcher and Kimiko infiltrated New York through tunnels Frenchie had mapped, emerging 3 blocks from Vought Tower as midnight approached. The building dominated the skyline like a cathedral to tyranny, its red energy pulses visible from miles away. Parademons patrolled in military formations. Converted humans moved with high precision. And at the tower's peak, visible through gaps in the structure, the boom tube gateway pulsed with energy that tasted like apocalypse, fire and submission and the death of hope. Beautiful, innit? Butcher whispered to Kimiko as they watched from a condemned building's roof. All that power, all that certainty, all that inevitability, and we're about to shove a traumatized 8-year-old's tantrum right up its arse. Kimiko signed. Will it work? Probably not, but not working while trying beats not trying while dying. He raised binoculars, studying the gateway's energy patterns, looking for weaknesses in something he barely understood. We need to map the tower's defenses, find entry points, and calculate how close Ryan needs to get before his power can actually damage that thing. They spent hours documenting patrol routes, security checkpoints, and the terrifying reality that Vought Tower had become Darkseid's impenetrable fortress. But fortresses had one weakness. They were designed against rational attacks, not chaotic assaults by desperate humans with nothing left to lose. In Montana, Annie and Victoria found Ryan living in an abandoned ranger station, surviving on stolen food and fear. The boy looked smaller than 8, his powers having burned away baby fat, leaving him gaunt and haunted. When Annie called his name, he almost lasered her before recognizing the former hero who'd been kind to him once, before everything shattered. "Are you here to kill me?" Ryan asked, his child's voice breaking. "Dad said Lord Darkseid wants me dead because I'm broken, because I can't be fixed." "Your dad's the broken one, sweetie, you're just scared." Annie knelt, keeping her hands visible, knowing one wrong move would trigger heat vision that could carve through mountains. "We're not here to kill you, we're here to offer you a choice." "What choice? To hide or to fight? To run from what you are or to use it to save people?" Annie's voice carried gentle steel. In 72 hours, Darkseid finishes building a gateway that brings his full empire to Earth. Billions will be converted or killed. Humanity as we know it ends. Unless someone disrupts that gateway, unless someone with power destroys what Darkseid built. Ryan's eyes widened. You want me to fight Darkseid? I'm 8. I want you to be what Homelander never was, a hero who chooses good instead of power. Annie stood, offering her hand. I can't promise you'll survive. I can't promise it'll work. But I can promise that if you do nothing, the guilt will eat you alive. You'll spend your life knowing you could have mattered and chose safety instead. The boy stared at her hand, the choice rendered physical. Behind him, Victoria waited with calculated patience, already planning how to leverage Ryan's decision regardless of the outcome. But in that moment, an 8-year-old held humanity's fate in his decision between childhood and weaponization. Ryan took Annie's hand. They flew back to Detroit as dawn broke, the boy crying in Annie's arms while Victoria piloted with cold efficiency. 72 hours to train a child for godhood. 72 hours to plan an assault on an impregnable fortress. 72 hours before Darkseid's gateway opened, and Earth became Apokolips Extension 4217. At the safe house, Butcher studied Ryan with a tactical assessment. Can you control your heat vision? Sometimes when I'm not scared. What about your strength, your flight? I don't know. I just do things and they happen. Butcher nodded, accepting the reality that they were fielding an untrained nuclear weapon against precision military forces. Right. We've got 3 days to teach you enough that when you cut loose, you aim it properly. Not gonna make you a hero, gonna make you a missile. Stepped forward, his gentler approach contrasting with Butcher's brutality. We're also going to teach you that using your power doesn't make you your father. That you can be strong without being cruel. That godhood is responsibility, not license. What if I fail? Ryan's voice was small. Then we all fail together, Huey said, kneeling beside the boy. But at least we tried. That's more than most people can say. They trained in abandoned warehouses and empty fields, teaching Ryan to focus his heat vision, to control his strength, to fly with purpose instead of panic. Annie shared what she'd learned about power's burden. Taught discipline without cruelty. Even Victoria contributed, explaining tactical thinking and why destroying the gateway mattered more than surviving the attempt. And Butcher taught the most important lesson, that sometimes heroism meant accepting damnation for the greater good, that sacrifice wasn't noble, just necessary, and that gods were only gods until someone made them bleed. 72 hours evaporated into 36, then 12, then 6. The gateway pulsed with energy visible from orbit. Darkseid's forces consolidated around Vought Tower. Homelander patrolled the perimeter, hunting for his son with mechanical efficiency. And the Resistance gathered their final assets, explosives, weapons, fighters willing to die, and one traumatized child whose uncontrolled rage might just save humanity or doom it faster. The night before the assault, Butcher found Ryan on the safehouse roof, staring at Vought Tower's red glow. Scared? Butcher asked. Terrified. Good, fear keeps you sharp. Butcher lit a cigarette, offering one to the kid before remembering his age and pocketing it. Listen, tomorrow you're gonna see horrors. Gonna watch people die, might die yourself. And if you survive, you'll carry that weight forever. That's what heroism costs. Your innocence, your peace, your ability to sleep without nightmares. Then why do it? Because someone has to. Because letting monsters win is worse than dying trying to stop them. Because maybe, just maybe, your dad was right about one thing, you're special. Not because you're strong, but because you're choosing to use strength for something bigger than yourself. Ryan looked at him, his child's face ancient with trauma. Will we win? Probably not. But we'll make Darkseid remember us. We'll prove that humanity doesn't bend easily, that chaos beats certainty when chaos is brave enough, and that even gods can bleed when children stop being afraid. The assault began at dawn. 200 Resistance fighters attacked Vought Tower from every direction. suicide bombers detonating against paradum formations, snipers firing from buildings knowing they'd die seconds later, and RPGs streaking toward the gateway before being intercepted. It was chaos and death and beautiful futility, humans screaming defiance at inevitability. Butcher, Frenchie, Kimiko, Annie, and Victoria fought through the tower's ground floor while Ryan flew high above, waiting for his moment. They carved through converted humans who'd once been neighbors and heroes, their faces serene even as bullets found them. Parademons swarmed like locusts. Homelander appeared on the 10th floor, his eyes blazing red. "Give me my son," he demanded, no emotion in his voice, just purpose. "Fuck off," Butcher replied, firing his rifle in futile defiance. The fight should have lasted seconds. Homelander against normal humans was a massacre. But Annie tackled him, her powerless body buying moments. Victoria used her head-popping ability, catching Homelander off guard and causing his skull to fracture before his invulnerability compensated. MM's military precision and Frenchie's explosives created chaos that even superpowers struggled to predict. And above it all, Ryan flew toward the gateway, tears streaming, his child's voice screaming rage at his father, at Darkseid, at a universe that had made him a weapon instead of allowing him childhood. His heat vision lanced out, not controlled, not precise, just pure power fueled by 8 years of trauma and 3 days of purpose. The beam struck the boom tube gateway with force that made reality scream. Energy exploded. The gateway shuddered. Darkseid appeared on the tower's peak, his stone face finally showing surprise as a child's tantrum tore at dimensional mathematics. "Impossible," Darkseid roared, his Omega beam streaking toward Ryan. The boy dodged barely, his flight erratic but effective. He fired again, his heat vision carving through Apokolips technology with raw power that didn't know enough to be limited. The gateway cracked. Energy spilled across Manhattan. The boom tube began collapsing, its destination shifting from Apokolips to somewhere else, somewhere dark and hungry that even Darkseid hadn't intended. "No," Darkseid's bellow shook the city. He flew toward Ryan, stone hands reaching to crush the child who disrupted his certainty. Ryan, terrified and brave and 8 years old, fired everything he had directly into Darkseid's face. The Lord of Apokolips stumbled, just slightly, just enough. And in that moment of divine vulnerability, every resistance fighter left alive understood. Gods could bleed. The gateway exploded, energy consumed by Vought Tower's peak. The boom tube collapsed, its destination lost to dimensional chaos. Darkseid fell, not dead but wounded, his stone skin cracked, his Omega effect flickering. Ryan fell too, his power exhausted, his small body plummeting toward concrete 50 stories below. Annie, powerless but desperate, leaped from the tower's 20th floor, catching Ryan midair in defiance of physics and fate. They should have died on impact, but Victoria's head-popping ability caught them, using explosive force to cushion their fall through the kind of desperate physics that only worked when heroism demanded it. They survived. Barely. Darkseid pulled himself from the wreckage, his empire's gateway destroyed. His certainty shattered by a child's chaos. He looked at the resistance fighters, broken, bleeding, defiant, and something like respect crossed his stone features. "You've won nothing," he said, his voice carrying less certainty than before. "I am inevitable. This was merely postponed." "Good enough," Butcher rasped, bleeding from a dozen wounds, smiling through blood. "We'll take postponement. Gives us time to piss on your inevitability again." Darkseid's laugh was tectonic. "Then let's see how long your defiance lasts." He activated a personal boom tube, retreating to Apokolips not in defeat but in tactical withdrawal. The Lord of Tyranny had been hurt. His plans were disrupted. His equation incomplete. For the first time in eons, Darkseid had encountered a variable his certainty couldn't solve. Humanity's beautiful, chaotic refusal to accept inevitability. The parademons retreated. The converted humans stumbled, confused, their programming disrupted by Darkseid's withdrawal. The processing centers went dark, and across Earth, resistance cells emerged from hiding, seeing for the first time that gods could be wounded. They hadn't won, but they'd proven victory was possible. 3 months after the tower, Earth existed in uneasy equilibrium. Darkseid hadn't returned, but his infrastructure remained. Processing centers converted to refugee housing, parademons reprogrammed or destroyed, converted humans slowly recovering their agency through therapy and deprogramming. Vought collapsed under investigations revealing decades of complicity with corporate fascism that had prepared Earth for cosmic tyranny. Ryan lived with Annie and MM, learning to be a child while training to be humanity's deterrent against future gods. His heat vision had carved across Darkseid's face, proving that power didn't require cruelty, and that even 8-year-olds could choose heroism over hate. Butcher stood in the ruins of Vought Tower, smoking while watching reconstruction crews tear down Darkseid's gateway. He'd spent 30 years fighting monsters who pretended at heroism. Then he'd fought an honest monster who taught him something unexpected, that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't power or righteousness, but stubborn refusal to accept that anything was inevitable. Darkseid would return. Butcher knew this with certainty, matching the anti-life equation. But next time, humanity would be ready. Not because they were stronger or smarter or more certain, but because they'd proven that chaos beats certainty when chaos is brave enough to bleed for possibility. Victoria Newman became vice president through political maneuvering that weaponized her resistance credentials. She was still a sociopath, still calculating, still dangerous. But she was their sociopath now, and sometimes you needed monsters to fight monsters. Huey documented everything, his footage becoming evidence that resistance mattered even against gods, that normal humans could stand against cosmic tyranny and make it stumble. That hope wasn't a mathematical delusion, just a choice rendered defiant. And somewhere in the ruins of Apokolips's gateway, a fragment of the anti-life equation remained, whispering its truth. That submission was easier than freedom, that certainty beat chaos, that Darkseid was inevitable. But Earth had learned to answer that whisper with one of its own. Maybe, but not today, not while we're still breathing, not while 8-year-olds can make gods bleed. Hope didn't shine brightest in the darkest night. It was the only light that mattered when darkness pretended at inevitability. And as long as humanity chose beautiful defiance over comfortable surrender, even gods would learn to fear the chaos of mortals who refused to kneel. Darkseid would return. They all knew it. And when he did, he'd find Earth waiting, broken, bleeding, defiant, and absolutely done with tyranny wearing honesty's face. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. More stories await.